What's up guys, I'm Justin Ball and welcome back to The Recording Percussionist, where I show you everything you need to know to get from that beginning stage of looking at a microphone or camera for the very first time to that intermediate stage where you feel confident in your ability to set up, record, and edit an entire recording session all on your own. In the last video, we discussed how to plan for the recording session. Today, I'll be walking you through how to start the recording session and some important procedures such as labeling mics, setting your input levels, panning, capturing room noise, and slating. Trust me, I've been there. You get everything set up, open your session, and you realize you don't know which mic is which, so you run your hand all the way down the microphone cable to figure it out, wasting valuable time and looking like an idiot. But how do we label them? Right? Left, 1, 2, honestly it doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent in your labeling process. As a percussionist, I learned to think of mics from a 4 mallet perspective. Mallet 1 is all the way on the left and 4 on the right. So if I've got 2 mics, I simply label my left mic as 1 and the right mic as 2 and so on. If I'm using omnidirectional mics up front and spot mics within the ensemble, I'll label the omnis as A and B and spot mics with numbers starting with the leftmost microphone. You can label the mics both physically and in the session. For physical labels, you can use electrical tape and a permanent marker and attach them at the base of the female end of the XLR cable. What I like about tape is that you can either dispose of it afterwards or simply tape over it for the next piece you're recording. I've also seen people use colored XLR rings. I personally don't do this, but if you're someone who's into color coding everything and you feel like it helps you, go for it. When labeling mics in the session, it sort of depends on how many you're working with. If it's just 2, the tracks are already labeled, so it's pretty easy to tell. If you're recording a piece with larger instrumentation, such as a full percussion ensemble piece, and you've got tons of different mics throughout your setup, you can label them with numbers, letters, type, or even use the player's names if you'd like it to be more personal. If you're going to use names, just make sure that it's a piece where the players aren't moving around and sharing instruments, which can create some confusion in the mixing process. In a case like this, it may just be better to use part labels. If you're using the color-coded XLR rings or even colored tape, you can even change the colors of your tracks to align with their respective mics. Setting input levels means that you're adjusting the strength of the signal coming in from the mics. This may also be referred to as gain or gain levels. Before talking about how to set input levels, let's talk about why we set them in the first place. Now, pay close attention because the following 2 sentences are paramount here. How loud something is after processing does not change the quality of the sound. How loud something is before processing can drastically change the quality of sound. What this means is that after recording something, the quality of that audio is permanent, and turning it up and down won't diminish the quality, but rather amplify it. Because this quality is permanent, it's super important to set your input levels beforehand so that the quality of the signal coming in is not too weak, not so high that it's distorting, but just right. If I'm using a matched pair of condenser mics in a spaced pair array, I definitely want the sound coming in from both mics to be the exact same. If I'm using a set of mics up close and another set further back to capture the sound of the room, I'll want to adjust the input level for the room mics upwards to compensate for the distance from the sound source. In general, I try to adjust my input levels to where the loudest part of the recording sits somewhere around -9 decibels, because this is what's going to get me the best signal to noise ratio. It also gives me a bit of headroom to work with in the instance that the performer or ensemble overplays a bit. The goal here is to prevent distortion at all costs. It cannot be fixed with any other method other than re-recording. When setting my input levels, I'll start by having the performer or ensemble play the loudest part of the piece several times. As they're doing this, I'm adjusting the input levels for each channel in the interface until that loudest part sits safely in that -9 decibel range, and I'm ready to go. Now here's the kicker, folks. Once you start recording, you cannot change your input levels. If you do, the entire timbre and quality of the sound is changed, which again, can't be fixed. So for example, you can't just increase your input levels halfway through a piece because part of the piece is softer. I mean, I guess you could, but the result is very different. You have to leave them where they're at for the entire session. Now, if you're recording several different movements of a piece, yes, you can totally get away with that. But if it's all going to end up on one continuous track, leave those input levels the same. Look, I know, it's tempting. You hear all of these recordings and keep thinking that they're too soft, and you complain that you keep having to turn the volume up and down between sections. Well, if that's the case, you're either not listening with headphones or maybe you're missing the point, which is capturing the full dynamic range of somebody's musical performance. Dynamic range is one of the most telling signs of maturity in any musician, and I personally want you to hear the difference between my softest and loudest playing, because it more closely resembles the real thing. Trust me, if you put on headphones and listen in a quiet environment, you'll start to appreciate this a lot more. Before moving on from input levels, I'll leave you with one more example. When you're adjusting levels in the context of a percussion ensemble recording, don't turn the input level of something down just because you want to hear less of it. Do that in post. Remember, if you turn the input level down, you're negatively affecting the quality of sound. The amplification of that sound can be adjusted as much as you want after the fact without negatively impacting the quality of sound. So, input is permanent, output is adjustable. Panning refers to the process of assigning the audio from individual microphones to the right or left channels. But what's cool about this is that you have full control of exactly how much you're panning to the left or right. If we're using an A-B stereo recording approach, you can pan the two mics all the way in opposite directions to get a wide stereo image, or we can pan them less to narrow the image. With percussion ensemble recordings, panning is even more important because you want to be able to hear the various sounds in the exact directions that they're coming from. Click the card up here to learn more about stereo recording techniques. Once you've got your microphones panned, you're ready for the next step, which is capturing room noise. We need to record what the room sounds like with zero sound happening so that later on in the process, we can cancel that noise out of the recording with noise reduction processing. Hit record, hold your breath for about 10 seconds, and don't move a muscle. After 10 seconds have passed, and provided you didn't hear any extracurricular sounds, you're ready for the final step before you start recording. I'm sure you've seen one of these guys before, but what's it used for? Well, whether you're recording just audio or both video and audio, we need to provide ourselves with an initial reference point. One popular method in the audio-video recording industry is the slate. When there are hundreds or even thousands of different takes that go into making a film, things have to move at an incredibly fast pace, so there's hardly ever enough time to label each of those individual files. So they use one of these to tell the editor in post what was being recorded, and the loud snapping sound serves as a starting point of that clip, which the editor can also use to properly align the audio from the microphones and the video from the cameras. For our purposes, this can be done by clapping your hands, which will appear as a definitive spike in the audio timeline. If you're using more than one set of microphones, it's important that you're standing where you'll be when you perform in order to properly adjust for any timing difference. If the slate is given standing between the omnis and the cardioids, for example, it'll reach both at the same time, which is not the same as what's happening when you start recording. When I'm recording, I'll give 3 claps at the first of each chunk and 2 claps after a really good take to save myself some time in post when I'm searching for those keepers. This is also super helpful when you're working with multiple camera angles, as it's impossible to hit record on all the cameras at once, and even if you can, you're only getting kind of close at best. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you're learning as much as I am from this series, consider subscribing and join me in the next video where we finally hit that record button and talk about tracking the session. Until then, happy recording.